drugs, guns, and money.
So, fifth topic, Mike. I think this is near and dear to Dan's heart. So maybe we'll do a follow up next week to the extent there's something new that comes up. Mark Messier was my sports hero. That was the first memories I had as a young 6-year-old back in 1994 when the Rangers won the Cup. My family had season tickets to the Rangers way back when, so I can name basically every member of that Cup team. I'm not the biggest hockey fan now. I support the Rangers when they're good. If they're not good, I'm probably watching basketball and watch something else, which even though the Knicks kind of suck too. But neither here nor there. Mark Messier was the captain of that team. He played for the Edmonton Oilers for a number of years, won some Stanley Cups there, came to New York, guaranteed a victory over the New Jersey Devils. They went to the Stanley Cup. They beat the Vancouver Canucks. So Mark Messier is born in Canada. He's a Canadian hockey player, but he's really a legend in New York. So where this kind of comes to a head, Mark Messier has now filed a lawsuit in New York State Court with a very famous firm that everyone, it's in law school, have heard of. That's Paul Weiss. He is suing an individual named Ed Mraz, suing him individually because of his capacity as the CEO of an Alberta cannabis company called Destiny Bioscience. So here's the gist of the lawsuit. Messier is from Canada, and he made this deal essentially that he was going to pay $500,000 into this cannabis company, be their spokesperson. And what this guy, Ed Mraz, I guess, did behind the scenes, he used Messier. He said, hey, Messier is associated with our product. And the guy was able to raise millions behind the scenes. So Messier is claiming in this new complaint filed, it's for breach of contract. It's for breach of the implied covenant of good faith. But essentially he's saying that this guy Mraz made a personal guarantee to him that regardless of how the company did, that he was at least going to get back his $500,000 investment. I think he said the greater of $750,000 or the share of stocks in the company. So if the share of stocks in the company became, $50,000, Messier would get 50, or he would get, I apologize, I have the numbers wrong. Let's say the share of the stocks went to 5 million. He'd get either 5 million or he'd get 750,000 and whatever the greater of the two was. So problem is the company's now worth zero, right? They're what's called a receivership. There's apparently bankruptcy. They're on the verge of some, we'll say some Chapter 11 type things, whatever the equivalent is in Canada. So Messier is basically suing and said, hey, I don't really care what this company's doing. There's no corporate veil that we're worried about here. I don't need to show fraud. I don't need to show, self-dealing. You have a personal guarantee. I don't need to go through any of those hoops. All I need to show for purposes of a personal guarantee, which you learn in contract law, is consideration. And here's the consideration. Here's the receipt. I gave you $500,000. That's the consideration. And you used that consideration to get all this other money, sponsorships that come in. So, I'm going to turn it to you. There's some fun stuff, obviously, in the complaint, which I'm happy to, to share. It's publicly available online. But where Messier is the most, one of the most prominent celebrities in all of New York, and his stature as a international hockey superstar obviously brought in a lot of money for the company. So, Mike, let me toss it to you. What are your thoughts overall on this lawsuit and Messier's chances of success from as far as you've seen?
I just want to start off with probably the best subtweet I saw in this whole situation, which is just 3 words. What a mess. I think that just sums it up like completely. I think it's hilarious. Great pun. But
what a mess. What a Messier, right? How could this get?
What a Messier, right? Exactly.
How about this, Mike? How could this get?
Messier.
Messier.
Messier is a very brazen guy. He considers himself to be one of the greatest hockey players of all time. He's got the hardware to back it up. He's got 6 Stanley Cups. I mean, he's definitely one of the best Rangers of all time. I'd have to hear Dan Wallach's take on this. But yeah, you go through and you read this complaint. It's a lot of guarantees that he was not going to lose money, or that he was at least going to get the investment that he had back. And he was signed up, and Messier, I think, said he was supposed to be their goodwill ambassador, and he was going to be, helping grow the business and build relationships with potential partners of this Destiny Corporation here. And I think they had a lot of investment backing. I didn't see the final numbers of it, but it was upwards of $30 million. I think they had a lot of investment backing to start. And Messier was given the personal guarantee that he wouldn't lose money after, I think, his own holding company, Mar Lion USA, bought 400,000 shares of Destiny at like $1.25 a piece. He said, you're not going to lose, at least you're not going to lose the money that you put in. And again, another personal guarantee that he had that just fell through. Messier basically said that this guy Moroz represented the investment was a sure thing, and that Messier couldn't lose any money on it. It was, this is a typical. When I was reading this, I was thinking of like Michael Scott in The Office. Like it's the best thing, and it's the scene where Jim, he's trying to do a Ponzi scheme, pyramid scheme, and he draws it. That was what I was thinking of. Just a side note.
And he draws. I know the episode. He draws it.
Yeah, he draws.
So he goes like these guys at the bottom, top guys. Yeah.
Right. This guy got me and him, and then we have to get three guys. And then Jim draws the triangle. So it seems like there's just a lot of personal guarantees and a lot of. I think there's a quote I wanted to say that Messier had that was pretty good. Messier goes, "Destiny was not a sure thing. Quite the opposite. It was a worthless company propped up by nothing more than Moroz's grandiose promises." I think that sums it up pretty well. It's interesting, and it's interesting around Messier's image and just who he is. And then I think it's just funny that this is also a cannabis company. I think they went in May of 2020. They were $42 million in debt. So
problematic. So I guess twofold, and this is kind of where the big, Messier and we should probably mention Messier, who have never, people that maybe are too young to know the name, it's spelled Messier. So that's me and Mike joking about what a mess and being Messier. So, just on that sense, if you're from New York and you don't know the spelling of Mark Messier, maybe you ain't from New York. But yeah, so I think what we should just, the bigger takeaways, right? We're going to have another world, and I'm sure in the years to come, assuming the podcast is going, which I have a feeling we'll be hanging around then. I think the world of cannabis and sports is going to have even further intersections. So the question that is fair to ask are whether this is going to maybe disincentivize athletes from getting involved in cannabis companies. So on that level, right? This, I can't think so, right? For years, whether it's been cannabis, whether it's been a car wash, whether it's been any number of schemes, players have invested their millions. There's a documentary on ESPN, a great 30 for 30 called Broke. And players invest in all sorts of things. Usually it's not retired players. Usually it's young players that don't really know what to do with their money. But they're going to go broke in any number of facets. So do I think that Messier looks any dumber for investing in a weed company? No. Do I think Messier looks any dumber for investing in a company that went broke? No. If you want to know why, and this is the second part of the question, Messier got a personal guarantee from the CEO of the company, which is not that typical. If you're going to be really smart, if you're Ed Moroz, and I should mention, we just have a complaint at this point. We don't have any answer. I think it was filed on November 18th, so must have been some type of extension of time to answer, or else they would have taken a default, but nothing has been filed. But normally for anyone that's taken corporations, you have to take it for the bar. So everyone kind of understands this. If you were a company, there's something called the corporate form. So let's say Mike and I created conduct, or Mike and I created Conduct Detrimental Inc. And we signed some type of deal with Mark Messier to be the spokesperson for Conduct Detrimental. Mark, if you're listening, we can make this happen, okay? And you can have a personal guarantee from me. It's totally fine. But if anything went wrong with the company and some deal fell through, Mark could sue Conduct Detrimental Inc., but we would be shielded by the corporate form. So unless he could really show that there was some type of fraud involved, or some type of self-dealing, or some type of you abusing the corporate form solely for its defense of this something called the corporate veil, you're not going to get around that. Now, what Messier did in the situation was basically go to the CEO. Listen, this is a hypothetical conversation, but he said, "Listen, I'm pretty well versed. I'm studying for the New York bar exam. People say I'm the most famous hockey player in New York history. I'm going to be the most famous lawyer in New York State history. I know corporation law and I know the corporate form. So I want you to send me a personal guarantee. So if I sue you, I don't have to jump through those hoops. You're just going to have to owe me that $500 grand, $700 grand, whatever it is." So this personal guarantee, I think if anything, Mike, it's going to be a lesson for CEOs of fledgling companies. If you want to pay the guy $500 grand, to be your sponsor, that's fine. But to ask Mark Messier to pay $500,000 and to be your sponsor, if it goes wrong, it's going to go really wrong, because people are going to side with Mark Messier, especially in a forum like New York. We spent so much time on this podcast talking about the Kobe Bryant litigation, where Kobe was suing, or Kobe's wife was suing in Los Angeles Superior Court. Mark Messier suing in New York State court is like, it's not home court advantage, Mike. it's home ice advantage, right? And we're in New York. I know it's snowing by me over here. Do you get snow up in Syracuse by you, upstate?
No, I'm in Albany right now. Yeah, it's snowing here.
Yeah, I think this is a lawsuit where Messier is designed to win. He's got maybe the most famous firm in New York City with Paul Weiss. So setting up pretty well for Messier. Do you see any shot that Mraz has of defending this one?
So far, just on its face, it definitely looks good for Messier. I mean, side note about piercing the corporate veil for any law students who haven't taken BC business corporations or BA, I should say, business associations or tax. I think they get into it in like tax 1 or tax 2. Piercing the corporate veil is very confusing, and there's a lot of hoops to jump through. So the fact that Messier has this, where he has literally nothing, he just basically steps out onto the ice and checks Mraz right into the boards. Like I don't see anything else happening here.
It's interesting. So if we'll keep an eye on them. It's going to be one. I know Dan's going to want to bring it up in the next podcast. So that said, we'll put this one in the books. I'll sign off as always. Myself, Dan Lust. I'm on Twitter, Instagram at Sports Law Lust. Dan Wallach, who will be rejoining us next week at Wallach Legal. Mike, I always botch your handle when I say it out loud. So you give us your handle and give us the podcast handle.
So my handle is Mike_son_of_law, just a little play on words because my last name is Lawson. And the podcast is at Con Detrimental.
For Mike, myself, Dan, we will see you next week, team. And maybe Mike will have a new Instagram handle, maybe at Mike Lawson ESQ, because he's now a lawyer. And we will see you next week, guys, on another episode of Conduct Detrimental. See you then.